born out of some legislation at the New Mexico State Capitol. So apologies to those of you from Utah and Arizona that you're not eligible for the program. Hopefully we can shed some light on some of the projects funded through this New Mexico specific program, and hopefully that has some bearing on what's going on in your home state. And I need to point out a big absence today is my Dean Bruce. Anytime he's in the room, you ought to feel fortunate because he has a lot of technical background as someone who grew up in livestock production and crop production. He's still doing that. For my piece of the program, I left ranching when I left my family, to pursue college and all of that. So I come from a long line of ranchers and have a bit of practical experience to lend, but certainly not the technical depth that Dean brings to our program. And so I share is about the communications of things. So if you see a typo on these slides, it is entirely my responsibility. Dean has no blame to bear there. A bit of background on the program. I just took a screenshot of the legislation that created our program. It's all of 7 pages. They are very densely packed with great information and with charges for us at the State Department of Ag to take on. So the program was created in 2019, the same year that the Healthy Soil Act was passed. And then we have questions about how we're implementing the program. We return to the program purpose. You'll see that I added some color to it because I think the 3 clauses that comprise the program purpose are really important in and of themselves. You can read here with me that the purpose of MDA's Healthy Soil Program is to promote and support farming and ranching systems and other forms of land management that increase soil organic matter, aggregate stability, microbiology, and water retention to improve the health, yield, ability of soils of the state. So there in our program purpose, it talks about who we ought to be working with, what we ought to be aiming to achieve, and for what ultimate goals. Lastly, on this slide, the legislation also does a good job of explaining how we can spend program funds. So some substantive categories there, grants, the centerpiece of our program. And I put a little arrow there to remind me that's really the focus of what I'll be presenting on.
Katie,
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, your slides aren't.
Okay. Your slides weren't
advancing,
but now it changed.
Okay, now they started.
Okay, thank you both for and yeah, please keep letting me know if you see something amiss here. So I'll keep on a trend. But yeah, so hopefully you have seen now the program purpose there in the center of the screen, and there at the bottom, just a quick note about how it is that we are allowed to spend program funds that come from the state, and that is on grants to improve soil health. That's really the centerpiece of our program and the focus of what I'll be talking about today. We can also spend program funds on soil assessment and education, promotion and outreach related to the program, capacity building for eligible entities. I'll describe those in just a moment. And last but not least, soil health research. No matter whether we're talking research, we're talking the grants, we're talking some other facet of the program, this is what we come back to at the end of the day, the 5 soil health principles. NRCS uses 4, other parties might use 6. These are the 5 that are codified for us in the Healthy Soil Act. So if you'll focus on the top of the screen where I've got pictures, I'm trying to cue us into understanding these principles that may be harder to latch onto in the abstract. But a picture of the house. Think about your own living situation. If there is a leak in the roof, you've got a problem, and things inside that house aren't as well protected as when you have a good solid roof overhead. So principle number 1 is to keep the soil covered, keep a good roof on the soil. Principle number 2 is to minimize disturbance on cropland and to minimize external inputs. You can see I've got that represented there with a downward arrow. That's what we want to see in the minimization of tillage, for lack of a better word, and also synthetic inputs in particular. Principle number 3 is to maximize biodiversity. Here we're talking plant life in particular. So you'll see that represented with all different kinds of plants there in principle number 3. Principle number 4 is to maintain a living root. So you want something growing in the soil for as much of the calendar year, for as much of the year as possible. That's principle number 4. And 5, last but not least, certainly, is to integrate animals into land management. And this is verbatim out of the legislation. It calls out grazing animals, it calls out birds, beneficial insects, even keystone species such as earthworms. I won't go through all of the bottom of the slide, but if you'll take a gander there, just offering a few examples of some of the practices that you can actually put on the ground if you are tethering back to one of those soil health principles. Great thing about the principles, they are universal and they are scalable. So no matter if you're talking a big ranch in northeastern New Mexico, or you're talking your own backyard in central Albuquerque, these are things that you yourself can put into play. Since we're talking about the grant, I want to spend just a moment talking about who is eligible to apply for those grants. So thinking back to a question Peter asked this morning about funding opportunities for tribal entities in particular, this slide speaks to that question. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see eligible entities. Those are defined for us in the Healthy Soil Act as local governmental entities with proven land management capacity to support healthy soil. And the Act calls on pueblos, tribes, and nations as being among those eligible entities, acequias, land grants, soil and water conservation districts, and cooperative extension service, which is housed at New Mexico State University. We've also welcomed applications from other parties that meet that definition in the law. So to give you a for instance there, the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District a few years ago applied for a grant, and they said, hey, NMDA, we're local government, and we've got proven land management capacity to support healthy soil. We welcomed an application from them, and it wound up being selected for funding. On the other side of the screen are our individual applicants. So we also welcome applications from farmers, from ranchers, from motherland managers, whether they operate, just as their own selves as a business or a nonprofit. But what these parties all have in common is that they are non-governmental. And because they are non-governmental, we require a couple of things from them. The first thing you see there on the screen is that they have to complete conservation planning with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, part of USDA. And that way they have the technical footing to basically build a project upon in order to improve their soil health. Also, because they are non-governmental, we require that they link up with their tribal government or with a soil and water conservation district as their project sponsor. That's the only way that NMDA can convey these dollars to those lands managed by these individual applicants. So we'll just jump into a few types of projects that we have funded on Rangeland. That's the focus of the group, I know. So we'll just talk about just 3 different projects that have through the NMDA and that we have funded through our Healthy Soil program. This one is probably pretty obvious to you all. Lots of talk about intensifying your rotational grazing. Having grown up on a ranch myself, yes, we were rotating pastures, but not this intensively. So the biggest pasture on our place was probably 9 square miles. For this type of rotational grazing approach, we're talking smaller paddocks, not pastures of many acres and even some miles, as I suggested earlier, but of smaller acreages. So what we're attempting to achieve here by intensifying our rotational grazing is moving those livestock very regularly in a very systematic approach. So the goal is to get that forage growing, to get manure spread out more evenly, and to ultimately improve soil health. So what we're doing here is basically increasing the stocking density. Rather than scattering cattle far and wide, they're bunched up and is sort of a representation of biomimicry. Cattle would bunch up when they have they do bunch up when they have natural predators to move them around. So the idea is that the human steps in to manage them as though they were being moved along throughout the landscape by a natural predator. So grazing periods are shortened, and the periods where the forage gets to rest and recover are lengthened. So what we get at the end of the day is maximized plant growth. And so the way to achieve this is to use temporary or permanent fencing and drinkers. That's a key piece, as you can imagine, to turn those large pastures into smaller paddocks. So to give you a picture of what that might look like, you can see there to the right of the screen a photo out of Colfax County in northeastern New Mexico, where one of our grantees utilized some funding to have some fencing, to purchase some fencing in order to bunch up their cattle a little more intensively. Next sample project comes also out of Colfax County, and you'll see it via the photos at the bottom of the screen. They started with quite a bit of bare ground, put out a bale that they grazed down really intensively for a period of time, removed those cattle, excluded them, and let Mother Nature do her thing. So what we're talking about when we talk about bale grazing is grazing on big hay bales in order that the cattle leave behind plant residue. Think about soil health principle number one. It's to keep the soil covered. So leaving behind some of that hay, not eating all of it, but rather leaving some of it behind as plant residue can protect those nutrients that have been deposited via the good old poop and stomp action of cattle. So ultimately the plant gets to uptake that through the roots, and we have healthier soil as a result. So when this happens is, and where it happens is on bare ground, as I suggested, between growing season. And that way the hay residue can preserve that soil moisture, and the hay residue can also decompose. And as I said earlier, the growing season swings back around and we've got new growth where that hay bale and where those cattle once were, or other livestock animals for that matter. So how we go about achieving these bale grazing plans is we direct our grantees to work with NRCS. NRCS has a particular practice code where they will sit down with you and work up the numbers. It's a mathematical equation to develop a bale grazing plan. So that includes the locations of the bare ground, where your drinkers are, where you're going to put in exclosures to keep the cattle off once they have done their action, what they're hired to do, for lack of a better phrase. Those figures also include the number of livestock to be grazed, as well as the amount of time they will be grazed, and then the amount of time they will be excluded in order that organic matter can return to what was once bare ground. The third and final example I wanted to share with you of projects we funded on rangeland is this one. This is an ongoing project in eastern New Mexico. It kicked off just this August, so we're awaiting some results, but so far some pretty promising effects seen out there. Subsoiling on rangeland. This was totally me. Look at the right side of the screen and you'll match up that red diagonal arrow to what you see in the picture. What you're looking at is where and subsoiled. So Dean Bruce lives in eastern New Mexico. He'd do a much better job of explaining what subsoiling is, but it's basically breaking up those compaction layers for a few reasons. We want to reduce the runoff that happens during intense rains. We want that water to percolate. We want it to infiltrate the soil. So ultimately we see better plant growth. That's really the goal here. Dean cautions that if you subsoil, meaning if you take a ripper through the soil and you fracture it at a depth of less than about a foot, if you do that when it's really dry, we've got disturbance. And as you heard me say earlier, that's one of the things we want to minimize in order to improve our soil health. We want to minimize soil disturbance to this degree. So subsoiling happens best when the soil moisture is high. That's according to Dean. And he says the person who's actually doing this project out in eastern New Mexico, they put a seed box on their ripper so that as they're making that one pass to rip the pasture, they're scattering seed, they're broadcasting seed right back into that path so that we're regenerating native grasses in the same area where the compaction is being busted up. And Dean wanted me to make sure that I really stress this last point, which is subsoiling must be followed by grazing management. Otherwise, the positive effects that you see in a short term will not be seen over the long term. So he stresses that management is really what's key to restoring our rangelands, no matter which project type you're taking on. I guess actually I did have a fourth one that I failed to mention, and this is another project type that we have funded in this most current cycle, again, beginning this past August. So we have a rancher is utilizing funds to rent some of the equipment required for virtual fencing. Probably everyone on this call has heard a bit about virtual fencing, but just to bring it on home, it's when a rancher uses GPS towers and collars to manage their livestock with technology. They're dictating where their animals go rather than those good old-fashioned barbed wire fences that we all are very familiar with. So it's especially useful where there's soil erosion or concerns with the water quality. Those animals can be directed away from those areas using those collars tethered back to those GPS towers. And how it happens, as you can see there at the bottom of the screen, is that the rancher leases or buys the GPS tower, pretty darn expensive, and the associated collars, then uses their computer or their smartphone to set the virtual fence boundaries and to adjust them as needed. So we do understand it takes some time to acclimate the animals to those invisible boundaries, to wearing the collars, to all those signals they receive through those collars. But this is one project that we funded to improve soil health in New Mexico. And I will leave us there in the interest of time. So encourage you to take a picture of that QR code off to the right so that you can join us for pre-application webinars. We're launching them in November, just here in a few weeks. We won't have an application until early 2025, but we want to get people started thinking about their projects right now. So again, if you'll just grab a quick grab of that QR code, you'll find the information to get signed up for one of our 2 webinars happening November 7th. One is for those eligible entities, those governmental parties, inclusive of tribal governments, acequias, land grants, extension, all of those parties. Versus our individual applicants have a separate webinar, so you'll want to make sure you're signing up for the right one once you land on our website. And I will leave it there. Sky, thank you very much again for the invitation.
Thank you for coming and presenting. So we have a couple minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions, just FYI, I do not have access to the chat in this room. So if anyone has dropped questions in the chat, I'm going to rely on either Helena or the speakers to respond to those. If anyone has questions, go ahead.
There's the question in the chat and it says, are they using weed-free hay?
Is a good question. I would need to verify that with Dean, but basically, Peter, to answer your question in a more general sense, we leave it to the applicant to tell us what they're going to buy and from whom. So we count on people doing their due diligence to make sure that they're sourcing good quality materials that fit within our procurement code. And it's their land, so I don't think they want to be left with a problem. But I'll verify that particular question with Dean, and I appreciate you putting that on my list of things to be thinking about.
Thank you. It's one of the things that we talk about often because folks here buy their hay from every place conceivable and purchase their hay, and it's caused a lot of issues.
Yes, and as the agency that implements the state's Noxious Weed Management Act, yeah, we certainly appreciate that. I will take that question back. Thank you very much.
Do you have any other questions? Nope. Okay, then let's go ahead and move on with our next speaker from the New Mexico Farm Service Agency. Anthony, you are on.
Okay, let me see if I can get this to work. Let me see. Sometimes I'm challenged here. Let's. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video on me. All right. And everybody can hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Well,
Yes.
again, good afternoon. My name is Anthony Chavez, and I am one of 5 state specialists in New Mexico for the USDA Farm Service Agency. And I am going to visit with you just as a large overview of Farm Service Agency and specifically my areas of responsibility. And so let me make sure I can do this here. So again, Farm Service Agency, and we have a lot of Farm Service Agency personnel on this seminar. And so a lot of you, if you want to chime in, you're more than welcome to assist and correct me if I'm wrong on some of the things that I'm saying. But basically, we're part of the USDA in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we provide programs specifically to assist farmers in times of disaster, and also through helping them get established in farming and ranching. We work with farmers, ranchers, our partner organizations, tribal entities, and pretty much we're in every county in the United States. So again, my area of responsibility is under farm programs, and I'm responsible for the disaster assistance programs. We have several other ones, and I'm also going to kind of touch on a few of the loan programs that I kind of have an area of responsibility for. But for the most part, my responsibilities are at the state level and doing farm programs. So, and I'm going to kind of just go through these. I don't have really too many slides that are for each individual program, but I'm going to kind of talk about them. So under the disaster assistance side, and what I oversee is I'm going to start off with our livestock forage program. So really the first 4 bullets in this farm programs presentation is what I consider trigger programs. Something has to trigger before these programs implement, which means that nobody has to come in and sign up. You don't have to do anything until some kind of trigger establishes that they are available for the producers. So the first one is our livestock forage program. And basically what LFP covers is the loss of grass or forage or grazing. This is triggered all by the U.S. Drought Monitor. So as was presented earlier today in the first seminar or the first session this morning, the U.S. Drought Monitor, I have the pleasure of serving on the New Mexico Drought Monitoring Work Group. It's about, for us, I think it's about 12 different agencies that consist of not only FSA, but everybody from Bureau of Reclamation to the State Engineer's Office to the National Weather Service. We all have a say-so in how those authors and present for the U.S. Drought Monitor on a weekly basis. So we have our input when that comes about. Well, that information, when it's put in, is what triggers the livestock forage program. So once LFP is triggered and the U.S. Drought Monitor hits a trigger, New Mexico is on a 365-day growing period or grazing period also. So we operate from January 1 to December 31st. So if we trigger at any time within the year, that will trigger LFP for our producers, and that puts everybody into motion as far as doing benefits. So the triggers are all dictated by the Drought Monitor. So the Drought Monitor, once it triggers at D2 for at least 8 consecutive weeks, or D3 or D4 at any point in time, triggers our livestock forage program. And it's calculated based on, they call them months, but it's really not months. They're really factors of how many payments that a producer will be eligible for. So they can be eligible up from a single payment at D2 status all the way to 5 consecutive payments at the maximum amount of payout for the loss of their forage, depending on how long they've been in drought and how far the Drought Monitor goes. But that pays mainly on the loss of forage. The next one that is, again, a trigger program is LIP, which is our Livestock Indemnity Program. Now, this is what LFP basically covers forage or the grazing. LIP covers livestock. So any of our livestock losses that would be due to a natural disaster or some kind of adverse weather event would trigger our LIP programs. And so in New Mexico, a few years back, we had a huge snow event, the Goliath storms on the east side of the state. When the Goliath storms actually hit, they hit over 2 years in December. Large snowstorms had several livestock losses, not only on ranches, but on dairies and in different areas throughout the state. That weather event is an adverse weather event, and it caused livestock losses. So that triggered our livestock indemnity program to kick in. At that point, producers can come in, they can apply, they can get compensated for their losses associated with their ranch or their operation. And in doing so, they get paid a percentage. None of the programs within my area of responsibility, do we pay out the actual cost of the animal or the actual cost of the actual crops? We pay on a national average. So based on our crop table, based on ag marketing or AMS and what their determinations are, those are how we determine what those percentages are. And a lot of times we only pay out 75 or 90%, depending on if you're fall under a socially disadvantaged group. So under LIP, again, like I said, that covers any losses to adverse weather events. In New Mexico, we also have LIP that covers depredations. So LIP also covers any kind of losses to livestock that would come out of an introduction of a protected species or a protected animal. For us, it's the Mexican gray wolf that was introduced into the Gila wilderness. So any of the ranchers that have depredations associated with the wolf introduction are eligible to receive compensation for those losses under the livestock indemnity program. So they can apply, and once they show that they can prove that they were confirmed kills by wolf packs, then they can get compensated for that. We also have some compensation for avian predators. Mainly, we get a lot up around on the reservations in the Navajo Nation and in some other areas due to lambing. During lambing seasons, eagles that will take lambs and different types of predators in that area. So the livestock indemnity program covers the livestock that is lost due to adverse weather events. So basically, those are the two areas as far as LFP is for the grazing losses for an adverse weather event, and livestock indemnity is for the livestock losses. ELAP is our next one. Again, that is also a trigger program, but ELAP is kind of our catch-all. So anything that's not covered under LFP or LIP kind of falls to ELAP for coverage. So if it's not covered for wildfire or any losses, again, we work off of adverse weather events for losses associated with either livestock or grazing or feedstuffs. Again, if it's not covered under the other two programs, it'll come to ELAP. ELAP also covers losses due to feed transportation, if you have to transport feed or if you have to transport water to your livestock. The other areas that it kind of covers is honeybees. It covers honeybees as far as colony collapse disorders, any colonies, or coverage of any losses due to feed sources for honeybees and farm-raised fish. So ELAP is kind of our catch-all, and it tends to be a really good program because it's kind of the one that has a lot of flexibility. So we're allowed to pick up kind of all the things that the other two programs don't cover. The fourth program we don't do too much with in New Mexico, but we do have it, is our TAP program, or our tree assistance program. And most of this is, again, it's a trigger program, so something has to happen. So either an adverse weather event or some type of natural disaster has to happen, freeze, hail, some flooding. We're having quite a bit of flooding right now in New Mexico, so we'll probably see some things happening there. Once those things trigger, then this is for orchardists, nurseries, trees, vineyards that have losses due to the actual physical tree or vine. So if they have any losses associated with a tree assistance program, they can get compensated to help replant an orchard or replant a vineyard. It'll help them to pay for costs associated with that planting, with rehabilitating vines and plants and trees. And so you can get back into the production industry. Again, these were never meant to make you whole. These programs were meant to keep you from going under, basically. You can get crop insurance. So crop insurance is actually covered by RMA, which is our sister agency. And under the FCIC is how the insurance programs work, where you can actually get insurance just like you would on your house or your car or any other types of insurances. You'd go through a private insurance agency and you can actually insure your crops. And they have crops that they cover. And in doing so, those are full coverage crops. If you're not able to get that type of coverage, it falls to our non-insured program, which is our last bullet. Now, this is one program that is not a trigger program. The NAP program is actually a program for producers that they have to actually come in and apply. So if they want coverage on their crop, if they are a producer, they would have to physically come in before what is called, and I'll go through kind of the application closing dates. But NAP basically provides financial assistance to our producers when they have low yields of inventory that occurs due to natural disasters. And it's not insurable by RMA, like what I was talking about. If the RMA will not cover that crop for whatever reason, if it's not a commodity and it's not eligible, then we can cover that crop under what's called NAP insurance or NAP coverage. They have to apply by a application closing date. In New Mexico, we have over 1,985 crops on our crop table that they could actually pick from or they have access to. And so there's quite a bit of opportunity for somebody to cover those crops. There is a fee associated with it unless the producer is part of an underserved population or an SDA. So pretty much if they fall under a socially disadvantaged group, Hispanics, Native Americans, also for FSA, gender is considered an SDA or an underserved population. So female owners of the property or of the farms or ranch are eligible to fall under that. In that case, the initial fee is waived. So there is no cost to the producer for their basic cat coverage or their 50-55 coverage. If they want to do buy-up or where they actually want to get additional coverage, there is a fee associated with that. But if they fall under the SDA, they only have to pay 50% of that coverage. So it is a very economical and easy way for producers to get coverage so that they don't lose everything during a natural disaster when something happens. Again, we're talking about deadlines. NAP does have certain deadlines, and that's kind of the thing that's really hard to explain to everybody. Since it's not a trigger program, you got to adhere to our coverage dates. We have applications for coverage. We have different forms that you have to fill out, and our county offices are very good at helping those. Our CDs, our PTs, or our PAs now are very customer service oriented and are wanting to help our producers. So they help you to at least explain what these forms are and what you need to do in every aspects of it. So you do have to go through some processes. It's just like any coverage. You make sure that you pay your premium or you get your coverage for your insurance. You are required to do acreage reports, so you have to follow up and report your acreage. That comes into play not only with FSA, but NRCS and other agencies. They use those acreage reports quite a bit as far as what your areas are that you need to do. You also have to make sure that you report notices of loss timely, depending on what crop it is, what type of crop it is. There's certain timeframes, and you got to report for notices of loss. And then you got to also say that you want payment for that loss, and you got to do that within a certain time for the coverage periods. So again, these are some of the application closing dates in New Mexico for what we have. And they range from January 31st through April 15th, which tends to be for the year that you're in. And then September 1st through December 1st for the next year coming up. So just depending on the type of crop that you're wanting to cover is going to be an application closing date that you need to apply for that coverage. Now for this work group, rangeland falls under grass. So applications have to be, for New Mexico, have to be submitted by December 1st of the previous year. So for right now, we are taking applications for 2025. You have to apply by 12/1 of 2024, and you have to have your acreage reported by 12/16 of 2024. Now for native grass in New Mexico, you can't buy up coverage. You are only eligible for your basic 50-55 coverage. And so you would come in and apply, and that would cover you for your grass losses. Those grass losses are based on drought conditions and grazing loss that is established by either loss assessors that we send out on an annual basis by county to make those determinations. So the other areas that I kind of touch on is the farm loans program, which is really important to us. And basically it's meant to help family farmers to start, purchase, or expand their operations. The big ones, we always have farm ownership loans. We have direct and guaranteed. Direct loans are loans that we actually lend directly to the producer and the farmer and rancher. Guaranteed loans, we tend to work with our partners, either like Ag Farm Credit or Ag Credit, and we would guarantee the loan. That the actual producer would get the loan through a separate entity, but we would guarantee that loan. So we have everything from ownership loans that you can borrow to purchase properties, and we have operating loans for annually being able to keep your operation afloat and keep it moving and create cash flow. Our two biggest areas of loans in New Mexico tend to be now are microloans. These are very simplified application processes that you can come in and you can apply for. They've changed it. It used to be $50,000. They've upped the threshold on it, but you could come in under the old program. It was $50,000. You could apply. It's basically a signature loan, as long as you can show that you're good for the $50,000 and you're able to show that you have the ability to pay that back. You can access that for ownership and or operating. Youth loans are a program that are geared towards the 4-H and FFA type programs or any other type of youth group that is wanting to get into agriculture or production ag. And you can borrow money against your project as long as you have an advisor or somebody that's willing to show that they're advising you on how you are working with your project to create an income. And once you either go through sale or you sell that production animal or production crop, then you would pay back your youth loan in doing this. So again, we push everybody. We've gone to a kind of a paperless system. We don't send out very much correspondence anymore by mail. Everything's done online. We do farmers.gov is our main source of contact. We also have other sources of contact where you can sign up for our text alerts, for our gov delivery, where we would send you emails and any information associated with our agencies. So that's what I have for you. I know I went through that really quick, but I can try to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for Anthony? No? Okay, if you think of any questions, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I will do just a quick presentation on Toby, which is tools for the beef industry. And let's see. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes, you are. Okay. Okay, let's see. Let's do slideshow from the beginning. Perfect. Okay. So, yeah. So digital tools for ranch grazing management, digital tools for everything really are just getting sort of more and more popular. It's just everything has an app. Even your fast food places have an app. So we set out to actually started out with the idea that we would categorize and sort of just do a survey of what tools were out there. This was a few years ago, and it was part of a 5-year grant-funded project called the Sustainable Southwest Beef Project. And what we found was that there were over 500, I think over 550 tools that we found, and we probably still didn't find all of them. So we said, well, holy cow, we don't need to build another tool. What we need to do is we need to build a library where people can find these tools. So that's pretty much what we did. So Toby is an online tool finder. It is a database of over 550 tools and resources curated from around the web and major app stores. There's many different types of tools within Toby. There are spreadsheets that you can download and enter your own information into. There are smartphone apps. There is reference material. We even have hardware in there if it has a digital component to it. So like virtual fence would be in there. And you can filter it by platform, by type, by topic, and or by keyword search. Now we're going to go take a look at Toby in just a moment, but first I just want to add the disclaimer that inclusion in Toby and the descriptions that accompany them are only for information. They are not endorsement. They are not recommendations. We are just providing a library of the tools, and then the tool performance is up to the developer, and it's how you use it is between the user and the developer. So here's Toby. Let's see. Did the screen change for you? Are you seeing something now that says tools for the beef industry with some cows in the corner?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so this is Toby. So the first thing you're going to land on here, here's your landing page. Here's your search bar. We do have a little video here. It's about a 2.5-minute video that just walks you through searching a tool. But basically, so you're going to come down here to your filters. And let's say, for instance, you want to find a spreadsheet calculator that deals with finances. Well, you can see there's about 185 tools that fit that description. This was by far probably the biggest category of tools. So that's a lot to search through. So now you can come up here and let's say you're looking for something that just has to do with stalkers. So now you scroll back down and you can see that now we're down to 14 tools. That's a lot more manageable. And then you can just kind of browse them. And let's say this one looks interesting. You click the title. It'll open up this information box. You can see who developed the tool. You can see the short description of the tool. What producer, what audience it was designed for, whether it's free or whether there's a paid version. And then the website here so that you could actually go to that website and find the tool and download it. If you do want to do another search, we'll point out you want to clear the filters first. Otherwise, it'll just keep filtering down and down and down. And you won't get all the results. I mentioned you could find things like virtual fence. So this is a new addition to Toby with our last update. So all of those kind of things are hardware. And then clicking livestock management filter is not going to help you much. You're still going to have 30 of them. So then I'm going to put in here, you know what? I'm not going to put in virtual fence. I'm going to put in water level sensors. I'm just going to put in water level. Now we're down to 8. And you can see that here we have all of the water level sensors that we could find that are on the market. And you can just browse through those. So that's Toby. And let's see if I can get back to my slide here. A couple more things about Toby. It's updated annually. We do make small revisions or corrections as needed. Every now and then somebody will email us and let us know that, hey, a link's broken, or you've got our tool listed, but the description isn't quite right. And so we'll go in and we'll change that. But other than that, we do the big overhaul once a year. Like I said, as of the last update, we include the digital ranching gear like virtual fence colors, in-tank water level sensors, smart rain gauges. If there's gate openers, I don't think we have any gate openers in there, but if we come across those, we will add those too. We did find one interesting thing. Digital tools come and go at a really dizzying pace. Every time we update Toby, we delete at least 30 obsolete tools or references or guides, and we add just about as many new ones. So that's an interesting part of this landscape that we didn't really anticipate, but yeah, it is what it is. So with that, does anyone have any questions about Toby?